What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and today we're going to be checking out the Bestech Lito. This is an Ostap Hel design available for $195, and I'll make sure to leave a link in the description where you can find this knife. Now, that $195 price point is for the version you see here, which has the carbon fiber inlay over that titanium handle. However, if you go with the olive wood inlay or either of the micarta inlay options, you can save a few dollars down to about $189. Now, the knife itself is ultra compact, which is right up my wheelhouse, but not going to be for everyone, at only 6.33 inches in overall length. Now, a majority of that length is in the handle, so you actually get a surprisingly good handle length here at 3.85 inches, and for my hand that leads to about a 3.5 finger grip. You can see my pinky's doing that sort of half on half off type thing, but it feels ultra secure. It feels like a normal 4-finger grip, doesn't feel like it's going to slide off the end, although I do have to stay relatively compact and cramped here. If I spread out even a little bit, that pinky ends up coming off the back end, and so do have to kind of stay forward on that as much as possible. Now, for most knives, I definitely prefer to get a little bit closer to that edge, in line with the pivot or even slightly forward of it, and this knife does allow me to do that. This grip doesn't feel quite as natural, so this is one of the few knives where I kind of prefer that back grip where I'm in line with that groove, where they're kind of intending for you to place your index finger in line with the frame lock here, and so that feels a little bit more natural, and that's the one that I gravitate towards, although sometimes I will still find myself creeping up above that pivot. Now, either one, the ergos are solid. If I am up on that pivot area, I'm able to get a full 4-finger grip, so if you have larger hands, that may be the move there. Now, it does have some jimping to add a little bit of grippiness to the spine, but it leaves a little bit to be desired. It's not ultra grabby. I prefer a more aggressive jimping. This one has a little bit of grabbiness, but you really have to put some pressure on it in order for it to grab onto your skin here. And so I would prefer that to be a little bit more aggressive or not exist at all. I'm not a huge fan of this kind of micro jimping here. Now, one thing it does is adds a little bit of traction that allows you to utilize this as a front flipper. So you've seen me opening it with the thumb stud. That's what they advertise as the only opening mechanism. However, you can see the blade sticks out a little bit there. It encouraged me to try it as a front flipper, and I am able to front flip this with some level of consistency, again thanks to that jimping, but I think it would be even more consistent and a little bit of a snappier action if it had a more aggressive grabby jimping. I'm able to do it still probably about 80% of the time. If you're really adept at front flippers, you can probably even do it close to 100% of the time, but still I think with better jimping it would be a little bit better experience as well. Now, the blade is a little bit on the shorter side at only about 2.5 inches, but we have that beautiful drop point blade shape, comes to a nice point and then plenty of belly. Have a flat grind that goes all the way up to this almost kind of exaggerated swed that goes the entire length of that blade, which I actually really like. Great placement on the thumb stud, nice sharpening choil here as well. Bohler M390 on the steel. They keep it pretty clean on the show side as well. The only branding we have is on our pivot with that Bestech advertising on the pivot. If we flip over to the back though, you do see that Ostap Hel design and then the M390 tucked underneath that thumb stud. So I'm actually a fan of that. Now, plenty of access to this frame lock, which is great. You can see it kind of drops onto the nail. You can get it closed with a single shake. Really, really smooth action. It is on bearing, so that's kind of to be expected. Now, one thing that I really like about the frame lock is because all of the different configurations have an inlay, it's almost more of a bolster lock. So it's really difficult to actually block access to opening your blade by putting too much pressure on the frame lock because the inlay covers it up. So you really don't have to worry about finger placement as much like you would with the typical frame lock, which is great because the knife is so small. It would be a little bit cramped if you had to contend with that as well. But I really never find myself putting pressure on this small area of frame lock that you actually have access to. And so I think that's a really well thought out design as well. Now, in terms of the weight, 2.96 ounces, which isn't ultra light for its size, but it's still light, so it's going to feel light in your hand. You're not really going to notice it in your pocket. Still a nice lightweight knife at 2.96 ounces. Now, we do have a reversible pocket clip as well, wire pocket clip, which isn't my favorite aesthetically, but works perfectly fine. And it is reversible, which isn't something you typically see on a lot of frame locks. Most frame locks are just right hand tip up carry only, or you can buy a separate model. Sometimes it's left hand tip up only, but you don't see a lot of reversible ones, so I do like seeing that as well. Now, as far as the thumb stud action, we already talked about the front flipper. It's pretty consistent for me, but still only about 80% of the time I'm succeeding. With the thumb stud, I think the detent is absolutely perfect on this one. It's got just the right amount of detent where it doesn't come flying open the second you touch it, but when you do, it is ultra snappy and ultra smooth, comes out of there very quickly with a satisfying kind of click at the end. And so I find the action on this one to be incredibly satisfying, a lot of fun to fidget with. Again, you have plenty of access to that frame lock without ever worrying about really blocking it. It pretty much always drops down onto my nail, and then I can shake it the rest of the way closed. Now, no lanyard hole on this one. This one might actually benefit from a lanyard because of its smaller stature. I think it would be nice to have a lanyard tucked into this back spacer, maybe in particular, so it doesn't kind of ruin the aesthetic from the side views, but none present currently. I guess you probably could find a way to thread it onto the pocket clip itself if you really wanted one. But overall, I think this is a really cool knife. Really smooth, nice and compact. Like I said, it's right up my wheelhouse. I know not everyone loves those sub 7-inch knives, but I think if you do, this is a really good option. It gives you plenty of handle space without having to utilize a finger choil. That being said, you see plenty in kind of this range where they'll utilize a finger choil that have similar cutting edges. Only 2.5 inches isn't huge, but it's going to get you through most of your daily task if you're just using this for kind of everyday EDC type things. I think it's perfectly fine at its sizing. Let me know what you think though down in the comments below. Again, I'll leave a link in the description of where you can find this, and then obviously if you like some of the other versions, there's the ones that aren't coated if you prefer the silver finish, and then there's my Carta version as well as that olive wood inlay version as well. And again, those ones are even a little bit cheaper, so if you're not a huge fan of the carbon fiber, that may be the way to go. I like the look of this carbon fiber actually. When I initially saw it, I kind of thought it might be that glow in the dark carbon fiber, but it is not. I've tested under UV, so unfortunately not, but I think that would look great as well. But thanks again for watching. Once again, leave your thoughts down in the comments. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, subscribing, or checking out some of my other videos. All help the channel out a ton, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.